Good evening, friends. Making a little video tonight geared toward people that have an interest in painting that aren't painting at this time, or beginner painters. So if you're an experienced painter, this may not interest you. When I was walking, I was thinking about some things in my head that I thought might be helpful. I wrote a list, and I'm sure there's things I haven't thought of. You might want to take some notes. These are some of the things I thought about. Even if you have started painting and you're new to painting, maybe consider making some changes for a while. Anyway, some of the things I wanted to go over with you about was, first thing you're going to want to do, if you haven't, is to pick a medium. Obviously, you have a choice of acrylic, watercolor, or oil. Acrylics are obviously very fast drying. A lot of people that illustrate, like you'll notice people that do wildlife illustrations, a lot of times they work in acrylic because they like that about them. They're very fast drying. I use them occasionally, and the way I use them is I tend to layer and layer with them. They tend to dry darker. In my opinion, because I prefer oils, I think they tend to look flatter. Like every medium, you can use them, a variety of ways. I did take an acrylic workshop one time with a gal named Patty Malika from New York. She used them very thickly. She painted very quickly. Her acrylics were colorful and bright. I could have carried one in to show you. I kind of wish I had. I have one of her little paintings. You really wouldn't know that they weren't oils. Very nice. But a lot of people don't use them that way, and a lot of times, I don't know about you. As you're more experienced, you'll notice as you walk into a gallery, and you can pick out acrylics in most cases. Like I said, they tend to be flatter. Again, they dry darker. You have to allow for that. They do make golden opens, which I've talked about before. They're a slower drying acrylic. I like those better. You can put a puddle of those out, and that little puddle will stay wet for a long, long time. And you have a little more working time, not a lot more. I say the good thing about them is that they dry quick. The bad thing is they dry quick. I don't know. But so acrylics is one consideration. Some people use them to tone their canvases and then paint over them in oil. You can do oil over acrylic. You cannot do acrylic over oil. And then there's watercolor. Watercolor, in my opinion, is the hardest medium. I respect watercolor artists big time. They're a very different way to work. You have to have a very precise plan before you start. If you're, in most cases, they have a very precise sketch. You have to preserve your whites. They're very unforgiving. This is my experience with them. With the oils, we're working, dark to light, thin to thick. But watercolors are fun, and they're nice to transport around if you like to go outside. I mean, they definitely have their advantages, but they're a tough medium. When I see a watercolor portrait, boy, I respect the heck out of that. There's also gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. I played around with most of them at one time or another. And of course, there's pastels. I have friends that paint in pastels. Pastels can be beautiful and soft, just lush, gorgeous. You have to, of course, you're drawing. You got to have good drawing skills. Of course, you with all of this, drawing's a top priority. Disadvantage to watercolor and pastels is that you got to put them under glass. They do make acrylics. Now, I know you're going to say I'm wrong on some of this, and they do make canvases now for watercolor, stretch canvases, and you can spray them. There are ways to get around it, but most generally you're framing watercolors and pastels under glass, and they're heavy. And then there's oils, which is my medium of choice. And there's some options with that too. There's traditional oils, there's water mixable oils, which is what I use. These are the Cobra, which is my preferred brand. Water mixable oils work like oils, dry like oils, but water cleanup, so they're less toxic. There are solvents you can use that don't have an odor, but they are still toxic. I mean, people will say there's no smell, but they still are toxic. So it's something to think about. Gamsol, you know, is a odorless mineral spirit, but there's lots of stinky mediums you can mix up. There's lots of things you can do with oils. People have lots of different ways to work with them. There's maybe a little odor with these. I don't notice it, I guess, because I've been around them. But again, I'm dipping into solvent water for cleanup, which is really nice because I paint a lot. And when I was with traditional oils, that little tub of solvent was in my face all the time. So I made the change, and I'm happy with it. So first, you got to pick your medium. Lots of options. If you think you'd like to paint in oils, don't start with acrylic. I've met people that think they're going to start with acrylic and work their way up to oils. Oils are, you know, I've done a lot of different ones, and again, watercolor are tough. I've had very little experience with pastels, but I think oils are a lot more forgiving than acrylic. So if oil is your interest, I would jump into oils. Okay, once you picked your medium, I would start with a limited palette. You can start, you know, one blue. You could start with one of each of the primaries in white. And there are artists that never go beyond that. Kevin McPherson, very well-known artist, I think that's what he does. I just watched a video recently on John Potashnik. He was using 3. And I did that for a long period of time because of Kevin McPherson, and I did that for about a year. And then when I started taking lessons, a gal said, that's fine, but I would expand it to a warm and cool of each primary. So that's basically how I paint now. Warm and cool of each primary. So would be my recommendation to you, is to do a warm and cool. And there's options with these. I use ultramarine blue, I use cobalt blue, cad yellow medium, lemon, crimson, cad red light, and white. But there's different ones. Go to a paint store and get some advice. But I would do a warm and cool of each primary and a white. And stay with that for a long, long time. You know, there's lots of beautiful tube colors, but I wouldn't vary from that for a long time, if ever. As you know, if you watch me, I add transparent red oxide and Indian yellow. That's my palette. That's all I add, and I'm really happy with that. Again, they talk about warms and cools. If it's cool, it's more blue. If it's a warm color, it's more red or yellow. It's kind of that simple. And sometimes it's tricky to figure out, I know. Again, you know, get some advice from someone that has experience, or go to a art supply store and they'll help you. Get some cheap panels. The cardboard, these are just cardboard. I think these are Hobby Lobby. There's a multi-pack of them here. They're basically cardboard, canvas on cardboard. You know, don't invest in really good materials. Doesn't really matter about the brushes. I wouldn't get very expensive brushes either. And this is the suggestion that I would make to you, is to set up very simple still lifes. You know, a piece of fruit, something simple. Paint it quickly. And I would even get maybe 8x10s. Those are 9x12s. You could even go smaller, 6x8s. And try to paint it quickly and put it aside. You know, do it in a couple hours and put it aside. then do another one the next day. I mean, the more you paint, the quicker you'll get better. More comfortable you'll get with it, the better you'll get with mix and paint, the better more comfortable you'll get with pushing your brushes around. But working from life, you know, I like to do that. And that, I think, is the best thing you can do. If you can, yeah, you absolutely can set up a still life. Anybody could do that. Not everybody, I realize, can go outside. Not everybody is physically able to do that. If you can, it's very enjoyable. It can be terrible. It can be fun. It depends on the wind and the bugs, but if you can do it, I would do it. Even if you go out there and take photographs and sketch, you know, sketch a tree from life. But working from life is great. When you set up a simple still life even, and you put a screen behind it and you put a light on it, I mean, that's your story. You're setting up, you're creating the shadows that you want, you're hitting it with the light source that you want in the area that you want. You can put the color fabric under it that you want and behind it. I mean, it's your little story. And you see so much more when you paint from life. When you take photographs, the shadows tend to mask together. You can see into the shadow when you're working from life. It's really great. If you do get the opportunity to go outside, I would, one thing that might help you is to pre-mix some greens. Maybe we'll do a little bit of that. You know, mix some different greens up for yourself. As you can see, I don't use a tubed green. A lot of people do. The disadvantage to that, I think, is that a lot of people, that's what they grab every time, and their greens can be the same every time. People talk about things that, if you're new to painting, or obviously if you don't paint, things that can go over your head. The first workshop I remember taking, a lot of it did go over my head. It just does in the beginning. You don't understand. People are talking warms and cools. They're talking about values all the time. Values really just the lightness and darkness of a color. That's all it is. People talk about, this is a value scale. They talk about, you know, 10 values a lot, 9 values. But that's all it is the lightness and darkness of a color. I've showed you this before. This is a picture perfect. Get down there where you can see it. It's really in bad condition. But it has these little red windows for that you can look through for value. And I have went around before and mixed color, try to match a color and value, and then look through the little window. Like, you can get paint chips from the paint store. That's a great thing to do. I've done that with my group. We just play around and mix color. But here's an example. You know, you can pick up these paint chips from the paint store, okay, for free. You know, say you choose this purple, kind of unusual color, and you proceed to try to mix it up. You can do a little test right on there and see how close you get. You know, you can put it right on there and see how close you get. Now, once you think you've got it and you put a little bit on there, you can look through this red window and compare and see if you've got the right value. Okay, see if it's the right lightness and darkness. So that's a fun thing to do. Just get a bunch of paint chips and mix up a bunch of colors. Some of these little paint chips even have the little like window in them. You know, you can mix it up and compare it that way. But that's a great exercise. Get good at mixing color and value, getting the right value and the color. We haven't hit on drawing, but I mean, obviously that's the number one thing you want to get good at, is to draw as often as you can. You get tired of hearing that probably. But again, warms and cools. people talk about complements. The complement is just the opposite color on the color wheel. There's a color wheel. You're going to want to get one of those. Blue and orange is the complement. It's just what's across from it. Green and red is the complement. So say I'm mixing up a green and it's too saturated and too bright and intense. I throw a little bit of the complement in that to kind of kill. It grays it a little bit and kind of kills the intensity of the green. So that's the complement. It's just whatever is across from it on the color wheel. A good way to, say you've picked up your panels and you got your paints and you're ready to go and you paint your first still life. A couple ways you can check and see how well you're doing on values. Color's easier, value's a little harder. Is to photograph your still life and photograph your painting and convert them both to black and white and compare your values to your actual setup and see how well you did. You know, I talk about different things when I paint here, you know, turning your painting upside down. People talk about focal point, that's another thing you hear. You know, you take and when you got a square canvas, you've seen me do this, you divide it into thirds vertically and thirds horizontally, and ideally your focal point will be in one of these areas. But there's no set hard rules for that. But I think the rules are good to go with in the beginning and then figure out what works for you. But if you've got one object in the canvas, only one object, I tend not to put it dead center. I tend to shift it off one way or the other. Just things that the eye likes to see. If you're starting out, I wouldn't recommend you consider selling your work for a long time. I mean, we all like to sell, and maybe that's never your goal. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people never sell their work. There's no wrong reason to paint. It's all great and it's fun. But if that is your goal, I would wait a long time because even, you know, as long as I've been doing it, I feel like I'm growing all the time. I hope I am. You know, and you look at stuff that you did a few months ago and think, I mean, hopefully you never get to the point where you just love everything you do and look back at everything you've done and think it's good, because then you're probably not growing. I can't imagine that will ever happen. Use your own photo references. Don't paint from calendars. I realize if you're not selling it and you're absolutely sure you're not going to sell it, it doesn't matter. Do whatever. Paint from whatever, and you can copy people's paintings even if you're not going to sell them. But if you get to the point that you are considering selling it, be careful of that, because even a photograph is copyrighted and you can get sued for copyright infringement. So use your own references, or if you paint from life, you're all set there. Save your work. You know, it's fun to look back. Shocking to look back sometimes. If you do decide, if you do decide to go with acrylic, I've showed it before, but one thing that would help you is they make a wet palette box. They make I don't have one, Masterson palette box, and they make, you can get a sponge to go into that, and palette paper which you soak and you lay down inside of the box, and you can mix up a puddle of acrylic paint and you have it to work with for a while. It just makes your life easier. You can get a mister with sprays a fine little mist of water. That's helpful too. Let me just squirt out a couple colors while we got you here. I won't keep you much longer. I'm going to put out some ultramarine. One thing too is I tend to put my colors in the same place in my box every time. I do my warm, my cool, my warm blue, I put them in the same place every time. That way I know where they are. I have painted at night a few times too, and if you're someplace where it's not great light, you want to know what you're reaching for, right? That's lemon. And one thing about Cobra is they don't make an alizarin crimson. This is my closest I can come to it. I use Duo sometimes too for the water mixable. That's a Duo, and they do make a crimson. And cadmiums are toxic. Even in these, there's ways around that. You could find something else to use. Don't use cads. But I lay it out the same every time. Some people, you know, I've been doing it this way a long time, right or wrong. But one thing I was going to say to you, say you do go outside to paint, is, you know, mix up some varieties of greens before you even start. That can help you. This is, okay, this is a pretty saturated green. Would you agree with that? I don't know how well this looks through the camera. And if I'm outside, even though in the spring the green can be pretty bright, I tend to take just a little red. That's, again, is a compliment. And it kind of grays it, okay? White cools. White lightens, but white cools. So you got to be careful. Can you tell how cool that green got? So if you want to pull it lighter, I mean, you're going to have to warm it back up too. But you could just mix. You know, here's cobalt. Let's just try some different things. There's cobalt and cad yellow medium. Let's see what we get there. Okay, here's lemon. Pretty intense. But I mean, just out of my limited colors, I can, you know, this is ultramarine with lemon. If you do go with this limited palette, purple is a beautiful, wonderful color, and that's another thing you might do is get a book on color and just research color. Ultramarine blue is my cool blue. And my purest purple is going to be, again, this is not a true crimson here, but crimson and ultramarine is going to be my purest purple. Hard to tell by that. You got to put a little white in it to see what you got. And I don't use black. On the rare occasion, and I might put it on there, like for a pet portrait, I never use it straight. But, I mean, again, this is the ultramarine. This is crimson. Very dark. It makes a black. This is, and it's transparent. Now, when you're doing oils, you're going to start, a lot of this is just my opinion. I start dark, I work dark to light, I work thin to thick. I like my darks to be transparent. You know, you want to keep that white off your canvas for as long as you can, because if you made the mistake, which I've painted with people that have done this, they'll like tone their canvas and they put white in the tone color that they put on their canvas. But once you got white on there, you're never going to get nice pure darks again. So keep the white out of there as long as you can. But the transparents are really nice. I mean, the darks are nice to, again, try to keep them transparent. But just play around. You know, if you could decide to go outside and tackle something, you can just pre-mix a bunch of greens and make it easier for yourself. I like making my own greens. And I don't feel like all my greens are the same, because I obviously adjust them a lot in value. I mean, even if every green I made was this and this, okay. Very saturated pure green, right? And maybe there's some place I would use that. Let's get a little more. Yeah, save every... Okay, say this is the way I started my green every time. And you can do that. I can adjust that pile all over the place. Okay, now, you know, we can go more. I'm running myself out of yellow here, wait a minute. But you can mix up one puddle of green, same green every time. Oh, I'm sorry, it's up here, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so I've mixed up this puddle of green, okay. You know, I can pull it more yellow. Okay, I can put a little white in it, which will cool it and lighten it. Okay, out of this same green, can you see okay? You know, we can throw a little red in it, which will gray it. We can even go more red. See, it kind of pulls it more olivey. And in that, you know, you can throw a little white. But I mean, you know, these greens was all the same blue and yellow. So play around, learn to mix color. God, it's fun. I just love it. And maybe as time goes along and after you've played with this a lot, you know, add some more colors to your palette if you think you want to do that. But you really can get everything you need out of this. I mean, there's that purple. You know, you throw a little more red in it, and you get a whole different beautiful rosier kind of purple. I mean, just endless. It's just fun. So hopefully that was helpful. I've been on here about a half an hour. I'm sure there's lots more things I haven't covered. Like I said, I could have showed you a few paintings. Maybe next time I'll start off and show you that acrylic I was talking about, of Patty Malika's. And there's lots and lots of tools. I would get you some palette knives. They're fun to use, even if just for mixing. Obviously, you're going to want one, but I paint with them quite a bit, as you know. I learned to use one. And get you did I mention this already? A view catcher. God, if I had to have one tool, I don't know, it might be my view catcher. I use it inside, I use it outside. This one's pretty dirty. But when I set up my still lifes, I adjust it to the size canvas and get my composition set up. If you're going outside, you need this. It is overwhelming when you get outside, I'll tell you. That's the challenge, is zeroing in on a small section of that big world out there and painting it. So, you know, but it's good for you. It's really good for you. So hopefully some helpful things. Throw in questions if you got questions in the comments section. I'd just be happy to help you in any way I can. But if you're not painting and you're thinking about it, I would encourage you to do it. You can order everything. I order from Dick Blick all the time. Very good company. They deliver right to your home. I've never had they're quick. I wouldn't pick the express shipping because they're really quick anyway. Any issue I've ever had, they take care of it right now. Really good company. So you don't have to even go out and shop. You can just have it delivered to your door and get to painting. I buy those panels that I gesso, and they're not very expensive either. Let me show you. They're a hard panel, and they're gessoed, but they only have one coat, so they're very, very slick. This is what I paint on a lot by Speedball. So I put a couple more. You got to take the time. I put a couple more coats of gesso on them, but without any, they're real slick. Can you tell? So, but you know, again, the canvas on cardboard panel would be great. Just you can buy those really inexpensively. All right. Hope that was helpful to somebody. All right. I'll paint next time. Join you again soon. Bye-bye.